What's up, guys? We are back here with some spoiler talk. Tarkir Dragonstorm is upon us. The official set release is just about a week, maybe a week and a half away as of the time I am recording this video. And we do officially have the full spoiler. And I wanted to wait until every single card was spoiled just to make sure we're not missing anything. I went through the entire spoiler multiple times, and these are the top 20 cards that I think will make an impact. Could be modern, could be standard. Different formats will come up throughout this video, and I'll mention their impact on their respective formats. So 5 honorable mentions and then top 20. They're in no particular order. I literally sorted them by rarity. Right click, open up a new tab for the cards that I liked, and then I just move the tabs around at random. So the number one card, I will say, that one is still, at the end of the video, and I know what you're thinking. You're going to want to click until the very end of the video. But wait, I promise we have plenty of things to discuss today. And also, before we continue, if you want to purchase any one of these cards, head over to coolstuffinc.com. Use promo code DOOM at checkout. There's a lot of sweet stuff in this set. So let's kick things off with, again, 5 honorable mentions. Number 1, Voice of Victory. As you can see on your screen, this is 2 mana for 1/3 that has Mobilize 2. It's a new ability. Whenever this creature attacks, you can make 2 tapped and attacking 1/1s. You sack them at the beginning of your next end step. And then it has another line of text, the important one: your opponents can't cast spells during your turn. So standard is maybe not as much about counter spells and playing a lot of stuff on your turn, but turning off your opponent, like your domain opponents, means now they have to Binding on their main phase. It really is good against Rides In because, they could still Rides In on their turn, but they can't really Rides In for cheap an untapped creature. So I think this has a little bit of potential in something like Jeskai Convoke, but whether or not it's better than Resolute Reinforcements or potentially even something else on this list, that's up for debate. Just wanted to give a quick shout out to Roiling Dragonstorm. I don't think this card is particularly good. It's a 2 mana enchantment. When this enchantment enters, you draw 2 and discard a card. And then when a dragon enters, you can bounce the enchantment. That line of text, not super relevant, because it might as well say whenever a pixie enters the battlefield under your control, return this enchantment, because that's really, I think, the only application for this card. And I think of the cycle, they kind of made one for each color. I think this is the best one. Pixie doesn't really have an enchantment that draws cards, and while this is sort of card neutral, if you can pick it up and bounce it over and over again, that can eventually dig through your deck and find you a little bit of something. I will say Pixie did just get stock up, and I'm not trying to tell you this card is better than stock up, but it's at least something worth considering. Winter Night Stories, another new mechanic from the set. This is 2 and a blue, sorcery. You draw 3, then you discard 2 cards or a creature card. Notably, a Borinoculus is a creature. And also notably, a Borinoculus has 5 power, which means that when you put the Oculus into play via recommission, Helping Hand as well, but Helping Hand makes it enter the battlefield tapped, which means you'd have to wait a turn on the Harmonize. But giving you, the fact that you have a decent 5 power creature that you want to reanimate anyways to make the Harmonize discount on this a single mana seems pretty appealing. It is 3 on the front side, so I don't know how many copies you want to play, but you can also discard this to Fear of Missing Out or something else, Inti or something like that, and then only cast it from the graveyard once you have an Oculus in play. Something worth considering, also very good with profs as well. So it plays well enough with Oculus that I think that deck might want to play a couple copies of this. It's Collected Company, but it's not. So 3 and a white, this is United Battlefront. Sorcery, 3 and a white. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You get to put 2 non-creature, non-land permanent cards with mana value 3 or less onto the battlefield, the rest in the bottom. I've heard a lot of people discussing this card, and I don't necessarily think it's as good as some other people do, but the main application that I see for this is specifically with Simulacrum Synthesizer, because casting this and getting to put 2 synthesizers into play triggers them both, gets out of control kind of quickly, or you can do like Synthesizer plus Braided Net, Synthesizer plus Perilous Snare, even just Perilous Snare plus Braided Net. That deck does have a lot of powerful 3 mana artifacts, so Keep this on the back burner, could be something with synthesizer, but other than that, probably does not have a ton of applications. And the last of our honorable mentions, this one is just outside the top 20. I like this card a lot. So Severance Priest, this is black, white, and a green for a 3/3 death touch. When it enters, target opponent reveals their hand, you choose a non-land card from it, and they exile it. And then when this leaves the battlefield, the exiled card's owner makes an XX spirit, where X is the mana value of the exiled card. So it's very similar to Skyclave Apparition for the hand as opposed to the battlefield. The reason that I don't like this card as much as maybe I should is the simple fact that it is 3 colors. And you're going to notice this a lot when I talk through cards in this list, and I did my best to try to find as many monocolored cards as I could. And maybe this is a rant for a separate video. The mana in Standard just, I don't think is good enough to support cards like this. It's very difficult to be able to reliably cast a 3-pip, 3-drop that has 3 different colors on the 3rd turn of the game. And with cards like this one specifically, they definitely get worse as the game progresses. So this is a card that in order to maximize its full potential, you really want to cast on turn 3. And good luck doing that with Sandstep Citadel. Alrighty, folks, let's get into the top 20. Again, no particular order. These are just, the order is based on vibes. That's really what I'll say. Corey Steel Cutter is the first card that I want to discuss, and this is 2 mana for an equipment, red and a colorless. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, has trample and haste. That's very important. And then another new ability, Flurry. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you make a 1/1 prowess and you attach the equipment to it. So that means when you go, say turn 3, you go Cutter and a 1-drop, that immediately triggers the Cutter. You get a 2/2 prowess haste. You can attack with it because it has trample and haste. This card has so much flex, so much utility, and does so much. It pays you off for playing 2 spells, which the red deck kind of wants to do anyways. It says each turn, so you can even double spell on your opponent's turn, make the prowess token auto-equip in combat, and then maybe even follow up with another spell with your prowess creature. It has equip, so it triggers Valiant off of Heartfire Hero and Emberheart Challenger. A lot of stuff this card does. And I would not be surprised to see this card become a fixture of the red decks. You don't want to play a ton of copies because the second copy is not nearly as good as the first one. Although, well, that's maybe not even true because they both trigger when you cast 2 spells. So watch out for this one. I think it's going to be quite good in the red decks, as if they needed help anyways. Now, you want to talk about vibes. This card may have the best vibes in the entire set. It's Craterhoof, and I'm not meaning, when I say Craterhoof, I don't mean the Moonshaker Cavalry or fake Craterhoof like the Pyrewood Gearhulk. I mean actual factual Craterhoof. And there's a reason why we've kind of made fun of these versions previously. They're all worse than Craterhoof. And maybe not a ton of direct applications in Standard, but don't forget, they did give us Elvish Archdruid in Foundations, and we already have Leafcrown Visionary. There's the new X green that searches. You have Invasion of Ikoria. A lot of ways to put the elf deck together. Problem is, you don't have a lot of good 1s and 2s. That's always been the issue ever since Foundations came out. But a very good top end for elves, and if there is an Elvish Archdruid deck, you can be rest assured it's going to play the hoof. I wouldn't necessarily say this one has good vibes, but it is good utility. That's Dragonfire Blade. So this is 1 mana for an equipment. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has hexproof from monocolored. The equip cost is 4, which might sound expensive, but wait, there's more. The ability costs 1 less to activate for each color of the creature it targets. Well, it just so happens there is a gold creature that searches for 1 mana artifacts. Breakglass Gearhulk. This card, I think, could be reasonable to include in the arsenal and the repertoire of cards alongside the Breakglass Gearhulk. It's kind of in the same vein of like Lava Spur Boots and Basilisk Collar, like all those equipments. Hexproof and monocolored, I don't know how relevant that is, but the fact that you can equip it to the Gearhulk for only 2 mana, maybe there's something there, but this one ultimately might end up just being worse than both the collar and the boots. So far, all the cards that we have discussed have really only had some standard applications, and Here's the first one that I think might be able to branch out into some older formats, which is Clarion Conqueror. 3/3 flying for 2 and a white, and it says activated abilities of artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers can't be activated. So I don't think this one is going to quite make the cut in standard, but specifically in older formats that have access to fast mana, it might even be too slow for modern, right? Because if modern is a turn 3 format and the decks that you want this against are doing their thing when you're on the draw on their turn 3, then this is too slow. But specifically in Legacy and Vintage, where you get to play Ancient Tomb and City of Traders and Artifact fast mana, I think it's quite busted in those formats. So shout out to the really, really old school formats with this one. It's not often we get a card from a standard set stock up that actually has reasonable impact on Eternal formats. We discussed Eternal formats. Let's bring it all the way back to standard. Flamehold Grappler. This card is really sweet. So blue, white, red for a 3/3 first strike. When this creature enters, copy the next spell you cast this turn when you cast it. And then a copy of a permanent spell becomes a token. Now, I noticed I said copy the next spell, not non-creature, not instant or sorcery, any spell. Now, you might remember our conversation from earlier about, well, 3 pip, 3 color, 3 drop. How the hell are we casting this card? What if I told you we're not casting it and we are reanimating it with Helping Hand? Because in order to unlock the true power of this card, if you can cast it for a single mana and then you then have all of the rest of your mana to work with to then copy the next spell, that's where this card gets out of control. You can imagine maybe like on turn 2 or turn 3, you discard Flamehold Grappler to whatever, you Helping Hand the Grappler, and then if you have enough other targets in your graveyard, you could just cast another Helping Hand and copy the other Helping Hand. So say, Magical Christmas Land, but you have 3 creatures in your graveyard by turn 3 or turn 4, reanimate, or even just 4 mana, cast this thing, then the Helping Hand from your hand as your 4th, because you have 4 mana on turn 4, reanimate 2 other things, and I could see it getting out of control in specifically decks with Helping Hand and like the Oculus deck. So keep an eye out on this one. I think Flamehold Grappler is going to be a card we definitely continue to talk about. Look, I don't want to talk about it, but Rakshasa's Bargain, it's good with beans. What else do you want me to say? Watsy, if you're watching this, can we please stop printing cards that cost 3 mana but don't cost 3 mana? Yeah, Domain's going to play this card, I would assume, because it's just an instant speed stock up that triggers Beanstalk. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say other than it's going to be good in that deck. Next. Moving on from not based Sultai cards to absolutely positively based Sultai cards, Fang Keeper's Familiar. So again, this one, take with a grain of salt, because again, 3 color cards, mana bases are kind of sketchy, but if you can reliably cast this card, it does a lot. So it's a 3/3 flash for 1 Yubga, which is 1 blue, black, green, has flash, and when it enters, you choose one of 3 options. You can gain 3, surveil 3, destroy an enchantment, or counter a creature spell. That covers a lot of ground, right? Gain 3 against red and surveil 3 to fix your next couple of draws. If you're doing any sort of graveyard synergy whatsoever, the Surveil 3 is probably equivalent to drawing a card. Destroying enchantment, really good against binding, Beanstalk, all that kind of stuff, Overlords. And then counter creature spells, very good against, a lot of decks play creatures, right? Counter Zur, counter Pixie, counter Screaming Nemesis, Sunspine Lynx, like there's an endless list of creatures. So this thing hits enough, it's a broad enough answer, and the bio clause is gain 3, surveil 3. Like again, if you're doing anything with your graveyard, you can turn that into a +1 or +2. So if the mana supports this, I think this one's quite good, but again, don't hold your breath. All right, you guys want to talk about non-standard formats for a little bit? I guess I maybe could have made an entire video on this one just for modern, but we'll kind of try to condense it into a minute or so. Ugin, Eye of the Storms. So if you've been living under a rock and you haven't seen the 9,000 complaints about pre-banning this card in Modern on Twitter, I'll read it for you. It is a 7-mana planeswalker. It says when you cast this spell, exile up to 1 target permanent. That's 1 or more colors. Has another line of text. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, exile up to 1 target permanent. That's 1 or more colors. That seems pretty powerful. +2, gain 3, draw a card. 0, add 3, and then -11, 4 lines of text that basically equate to you win the game. Okay. So very, very good in a format where you have a bevy of fast mana. So Ugin's Labyrinth, Urzatron, etc., artifact mana. Also a format where you play 0 mana artifacts. Tormod's Crypt. I mean, I don't know how deep you want to go with this, but like Walking Ballista, Hangerback Walker, Ornithopter. There's millions of 0 mana artifacts in Modern. So I think this card's good, but I don't think it's pre-ban good. The reason I think this is because the current crop of Eldrazi decks are playing Eldrazi Temple, and this card is not good in decks that have Eldrazi Temple. At least I think so. Again, I might get some black in the comments, and I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. But I think this is really only good if you're playing Tron. So if you get people to like basically sort of, you give people a reason to go back to playing Tron, I think that's fine. Maybe the bar on this one is too high, and maybe we'll see it end up being too good, but for now, I'm not saying it's bad. Don't take this the wrong way, but I don't really think the sky is falling like everybody else is. But good solid card for Modern. I'm excited to try decks with it with Tron again, and we'll see how those pan out. All right, let's flip it all the way back to Standard now. Sun Pearl Kieran. Why are we buffing Pixie again? Why are we giving Pixie new cards? Not really sure. 1 and a white for a 2/1 flash flying. When this creature enters, return up to 1 other target non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. Tell me if you've heard that line of text before. If it was a token, draw a card. So this card is quite good. Now, sort of a direct comparison that you could make with this card, and if you're talking about Pixie and Esper Pixie in current Standard, is Fear of Isolation, right? Fear of Isolation is 2 mana for a 2/3, additional cost, pick up a permanent. So they're not quite the same card, right? Fear of Isolation has the upside of having 3 toughness, and even if the Fear of Isolation gets countered, the bounce is as an additional cost. So you're picking up the permanent whether or not they counter your Fear of Isolation. This one, again, 1 toughness, doesn't have the additional cost, but has flash, and if you bounce a token, like say an Otter token or a Roll token from Spiteful Hexmage, you draw a card. So there's definitely some pluses and minuses to both cards. I don't think you want to play 4 of each in addition to the 4 Pixies, but I could see you start with 4 Pixie and then maybe you play 2 Karen, 3 Fear, or somewhere in that range. I think is probably going to be what people end up doing. But all in all, good card. And again, why are we making Pixie better? Oh, look, another 3-color, 3-pip card that is going to be impossible to cast. Look, I'm trying, okay? Mardu Siegebreaker is a cool as hell card. 4/4, Death Touch Haste for 1 red, white, black. Whenever this creature enters, exile up to 1 other target creature you control until this leaves the battlefield. And then whenever it attacks, for each opponent, you make a tap token that's a copy of the exiled card attacking that opponent, sack at the end step. So extremely powerful. So I saw this interaction on Twitter the other day. Extremely powerful with prototypes. More specifically, Phyrexian Fleshgorger. If you Fleshgorger on turn 3 as a 3/3, and you Siegebreaker on 4, exile your Fleshgorger, you then attack with the Siegebreaker, and that gets you a copy of the Fleshgorger, but not the prototype, the original Fleshgorger. So you get to hit them with a giant Fleshgorger. Maybe that's Magical Christmas Land. There's plenty of other cool stuff you can do with this, where just, being able to repeatedly copy any creature with an ETB ability, or again, something that has a high amount of power. I think there's some things you can do with this, and the fact that it is 4/4 haste for 4 and Death Touch, it's close to playable. Again, you just got to figure out how the hell to cast it. Thank God, a monocolored card. Carsey Revenant, which is 1 BB for a 3/3 flying Death Touch lifelink. Unfortunate that they printed Vampire Nighthawk in Foundations, and then Power Creep Vampire Nighthawk 2 sets later. And you thought I was done, but I'm not. It also has Renew. So for 2 and a black, you can exile this card from your graveyard, put a flying counter, a death touch counter, and a lifelink counter on target creature. Yeah, this card is really sick, and I haven't seen a lot of people talking about it. Flying, Death Touch, Lifelink, really good set of keywords. It can trade up, it can race mono red, and then if you trade off for a creature, you can then later on, maybe turn 5 or turn 6, use this to give one of your demons or otherwise large black creatures flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink. A really sweet card. Haven't heard a lot of chatter about it, but I think has the chance to make mono black quite a good deck. I could just see the meme right now of me showing you yet another 3-color, 4-mana, or 3-mana creature, and just somebody in the background. How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? Look, I'm trying. Yathan Roadwatcher, 4-mana, 1 and Abzan for a 3/3. When this creature enters, if you cast it, that's important. Missed that line of text at first. Mill 4 cards. When you do, return a creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So plays very nicely with the next card that I'm going to talk about, which is, you'll see in a second. I don't know, this card's cool. The fact that it helps self-mill, so if you're doing anything with your graveyard, like, I don't know, Roots or Reanimator or some sort of graveyard shenanigans, Bloodghast or Cauldron, there's plenty of graveyard stuff. It helps fulfill that, and it is 2 bodies for 4 mana. So you can effectively get 7 mana worth of cards. You get this, which is a 4 mana card, and then Reanimate a 3 mana card for 4 mana. So I don't know. It's really cool. Again, the big problem is how the hell are you casting it? But I could see it doing some stuff. Again, and I'm just gonna segue this right into the next one. Skirmish Rhino. You probably, based on what I mentioned earlier, this is Baby Siege Rhino. It's black, white, green for a 3/4 trample. When it enters, each opponent loses 2 and you gain 2. So works very well with the other Abzan 4-drop. I mean, just like, imagine that curve, right? No matter what you do in the first couple of turns, turn 4, just get a 3/3, a 3/4, drain them for 2. Like, it sounds powerful, but again, the hardest part is figuring out how you're going to cast all these cards. And just a quick side note, a lot of these cards that I've been talking about, at least the 4-mana cards, you could maybe use the Pixie mana base as an example of a playable 3-color mana base. The problem is you can't really reliably cast 4-drops with the Pixie mana base because they're playing 12 fast lands, and you are just going to have your 4th land enter the battlefield tapped more than half of the time. So you can't even do that. If anybody's good at building mana bases, slide into my DMs. They're open. Let me know. Okay, this one is an absolute banger. It's only an uncommon too. Frontline Rush. This is red and a white, instant. You can choose one. Either make 2 1/1 goblins that are red, or target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. So, Convoke anybody? This card is quite powerful in Convoke because it is very similar to a card they already play, which is Resolute Reinforcements, for all intents and purposes. It's 2 mana, flash, 2 1/1s. That's what this is. But it also has the bio clause of, if your opponent leaves one creature unblocked, they die. And I think that's cool. I think that's a really cool, it gives the Convoke deck a little bit more dimension inside of combat, and I like that. I think that it leads to more strategical decisions and things of that nature. The one issue that I will mention, this is not a creature, specifically with regards to Knight Errant of Eos. So I don't know if you necessarily want to just swap 4 reinforcements for 4 of this. You probably have to up the creature count somewhere else if you want to play this card. So keep that in mind. It is extremely powerful for Convoke, but you just want to make sure your creature count is, I would say, probably somewhere in the like 26, 27 range for Knight Errant. Speaking of non-creature banger cards for Convoke, here's another one. Maybe we just cut the Knight Errants at this point. Frostcliff Siege. So this is 1 blue and a red enchantment. They made a cycle of these. I think this is the only good one. Let me know in the comments if you guys like any of the other sieges, because I didn't think they were that good. But this one is choose Jeskai or Temur. If you choose Jeskai, whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. Unfortunate that it says 1 or more, so it does not work like Enduring Curiosity. Keep that in mind. Or the good line of text, Temur. Creatures you control get +1/+0, have trample, and haste. Giving every single one of your creatures a buff, trample, and haste is ridiculous. And I don't know how else to express this other than just say, imagine if Gleeful Demolition was 1 mana, put 3 2/1 haste trample tokens into play. That would be ridiculous. So, I mean, that's all I really have to say. You want to play more cards that make multiple bodies. Maybe you want to play both the Rush and Resolute Reinforcements and Gleeful Demolition and more ways to make multiple bodies with one card, because this card is crazy, and I think it's probably better than War Leader's Call. Might even be better than Recruiter, although, again, Recruiter has the upside of being a creature for Knight Errant, so do keep that in mind. All right, this video is running a bit longer than I had expected. I just like talking about Tarkir, I guess. We got 5 left, okay? Stay with me. If you have watched the video up until this point, let me know what you think my number 1 card is going to be. Pause the video, drop a comment in the comment section down below. While you're there, subscribe because you know you want to. Let me know. I'm curious. So, number 5, Avenger of the Fallen. Well, not really number 5, but you get the idea. Anyways, 3 mana for a 2/4 Death Touch. It has Mobilize X, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Remember Mobilize from before? Whenever this creature attacks, you make X 1/1 red tokens that are tapped and attacking. You sack them at the beginning of the next end step. So remember all that stuff that I was talking about earlier about having a good payoff for self-mill? Here you go. Honestly, I think this might be the single best payoff for self-mill in the entire format. I'm not sure exactly what's competing for it, but if you can turbo self-mill yourself a bunch and then attack with this thing, they might just die on the spot. If you can find some way to give it haste in, I guess you probably have to play red or something along those lines. I guess you could do green with Surrak. You could do Bitter Reunion, but basically if you can self-mill and give this thing haste, it could just kill him on the spot. So keep this one in mind. Why do they keep giving us new cards for Pixie? Okay, this one maybe not as good in the Pixie deck. This is Sage of the Skies. So it's 3 mana for a 2/3 flying lifelink. You might say to yourself, well, there's got to be more. That I wouldn't play that card. When you cast this spell, if you've cast another spell this turn, copy this spell. So, for example, if you have this on the battlefield and you have 4 mana, you play a Pixie, return Sage of the Skies, and replay Sage of the Skies, you get 2 Sage of the Skies. That's cool. Again, 3 mana for a 2/3 is not a good deal, but here's the question you have to ask yourself. Would you want to pay 3 mana for 2/2/3 flying lifelinks? Maybe not 3 mana, maybe closer to 4 because you kind of need to play with Pixie. So would you want to pay 4 mana for 2/2/3 flying lifelinks? Maybe, and I think that's good for some matchups like mono red, but I don't think it's a main deck card if, specifically with Pixie. Maybe it's good for other formats, but as far as standard is concerned, it's good, but I think only a sideboard card at best. How about Surrak, Elusive Hunter? Counterspell enjoyers, be gone. So this is 2 and a green for a 4/3. This spell can't be countered. It has trample. And whenever a creature you control or a creature spell you control becomes the target of a spell or ability, you draw a card. So the fact that they even put or a creature spell you control on this card, I mean, like, if you've ever wanted to see a card that just says, like, just puts a giant middle finger up to every single counterspell ever printed, here you go. I do think this is an excellent sideboard card, because not only can it not be countered, they kind of need to kill the Surrak before they kill any of your other stuff, and if they do, you draw a card. So you're guaranteed a 2-for-1 at minimum because they can't counter it. Good sideboard card, maybe good enough for a main deck card. I mean, 3 mana for 4 power and trample, not the worst stats. So fantastic card, going after the right people, although the counter spells in standard kind of suck. Alrighty, I only got 2 left for you. The second to last card is going to be Rot Curse Rakshasa. This is 2 mana for a 5/5 trample. Notably, it is creature type demon. That's going to matter. It has Decayed, which means it can't block, and when it attacks, you sacrifice it at end of combat. And you can renew to pay XBB, exile this card from your graveyard, put a decayed counter on each of X target creatures. So this card has a lot of applications. So the first one, the very kind of point blank one that hits you right in the face, is it's a demon. And you can go turn 2, Rock Curse Rakshasa, turn 3, Unholy Annex. And now you have a demon in play to be able to trigger your Annex. Believe it or not, I actually think that is the worst application for this card because it has Decayed. So if you ever attack with the Rakshasa, it's going to die and it's not going to be in play to trigger your Annex. Now, that being said, Demon decks will probably play a couple of these just for curve considerations. They don't really have any good 2-mana plays. So where I really like this card is specifically, remember, going back to the 2/1 Flash Flyer that we talked about earlier, and more importantly, it's really good with Kaido because you can attack with the Rakshasa, and then, it normally would sacrifice at end of combat, but not if you ninjutsu it, because it's not in play to be sacrificed. And then you can play it again. That's something cool you can do with it. And then the renew is kind of cool too, because people don't realize this, but it's kind of like your opponent's team can't block for a turn because you can decayed onto their creatures, and decayed creatures can't block. Even if they don't want to attack with them because they would lose them, they can't block with them for a turn. So a lot of stuff in this small little 2-mana 5/5, but I think it's got a lot of potential. And again, now that we've gone through the Rock Curse Rakshasa, you probably can figure out what number 1 is. But here it is. Elspeth, Storm Slayer. Although she's really slaying the storms, she's also slaying the text on her own name because it's really hard to read with the lightning over there. Yeah. So Elspeth, in my opinion, is the single best card in the set for standard. Okay. I want to make sure I reiterate that for standard. So it's 5 mana, 3 white, 5 loyalty. It says if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control this turn, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. So +1, create a single 1/1. Doesn't sound very good, but her own ability makes you double that. So it's +1, make 2 1/1s. 0, put a counter on each creature you control. Those creatures gain flying until your next turn. So offense and defense with that ability because you get flying on their turn. And then -3, destroy a creature an opponent controls with mana value 3 or greater. I mean, this card is cracked. Absolutely insane. The bar on 5 mana planeswalkers is pretty high because of how fast standard is, but I think this might be one of the best ones they've ever printed in terms of 5 mana planeswalkers. It has to be up there. Being able to make 2 bodies the turn that you play her, giving you an extra body to protect her, the fact that she even goes to 6, like 6 is a pretty high loyalty with the 2 bodies to protect. Again, the 0, putting a counter on all of your creatures and giving them flying until your next turn, so flying on their turn, and the -3 just basically kills anything with mana value 3 or greater. There's a lot of really good targets. Yeah, I think this card is phenomenal. It's unfortunate that not as good against Monstrous Rage because she only makes 1/1s. But yeah, this card is going to single-handedly revive the mono white tokens deck. It's probably going to be good in blue-white control. It's going to be good in some sort of black-white deck. I could even see Celestia because she triggers up the Beanstalk. You can ramp into her. Just everything you could ever want out of a Planeswalker, Elspeth has got your back. And that, my friends, is going to do it for another Top 20 spoiler episode. Again, I'm going to thank you guys very, very much for watching. If you want to purchase any of the cards you saw on today's video, head over to CoolStuffInc.com. Be sure to use promo code DOOM at checkout. Get yourself 5% off. Thank you all again so much for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. And until next time, adios.